One heartbeat could have rewritten England's destiny forever. What if Catherine of Aragon had given Henry VIII the son he so desperately wanted? History tells us that Catherine, steadfast and devoted, bore only one surviving child, Mary, leaving Henry frustrated and desperate for a male heir. The absence of a son plunged the kingdom into political tension, personal heartbreak, and ultimately, religious upheaval. But imagine a world where Catherine bore a healthy boy. The very foundation of the Tudor dynasty would have been solidified, the succession crisis averted, and the fateful break with the Catholic Church might never have occurred. The threads of English history, marriages, rebellions, and reforms could have followed an entirely different path. In this scenario, the Protestant Reformation in England, the rise of Anne Boleyn, and the turmoil that engulfed Henry's court all hinge on that single, pivotal moment. Understanding this what-if illuminates just how fragile and consequential the Tudor throne truly was. A princess from Spain, married to the most powerful king in Europe, destined to be queen, yet forever haunted by her failure to produce a male heir. Catherine of Aragon, daughter of Ferdinand and Isabella, was no ordinary princess. She was the embodiment of Spanish power, a carefully cultivated diplomatic asset whose marriage to Henry VIII in 1509 symbolized a union of two great European powers. Intelligent, devout, and politically astute, Catherine carried with her not only royal blood but the weight of dynastic expectations. From the very beginning, her role in England was clear. She was to secure the Tudor lineage and strengthen England's place on the European stage. When Catherine married Henry, the young king was captivated by her charm, education, and piety. Their union began with hope, love, and mutual respect, but the pressure to produce a male heir loomed over them like a shadow. Catherine's pregnancies were frequent yet tragic. Their first child, Mary, arrived in 1516, bringing immense joy but also an unspoken tension. The kingdom still lacked a male successor. In the following years, Catherine endured repeated pregnancies, most ending in miscarriage or stillbirth. Each loss compounded her grief, leaving her emotionally exhausted, yet she remained steadfast and dutiful. Henry's perspective, however, was consumed by dynastic ambition. His obsession with securing a male heir became the defining lens through which he viewed Catherine and their marriage. He admired her loyalty but grew increasingly frustrated, seeing her repeated miscarriages as a personal and political failure. The emotional stakes could not have been higher. Catherine's devotion contrasted sharply with Henry's growing impatience and desperation. Their marriage, once celebrated, began to strain under the weight of England's future. The tension escalated as years passed without a surviving son. Catherine's resilience in the face of heartbreak and Henry's mounting political anxiety reached a critical point. Each pregnancy that failed to produce a male heir intensified the pressure on both the queen and the king. Catherine's personal grief was profound, rooted not only in her losses but also in her awareness that her inability to provide a son could alter the course of English history. Meanwhile, Henry's frustration fueled his determination to seek alternatives, setting the stage for the dramatic break that would come to define his reign. Ultimately, the repeated miscarriages and the absence of a male heir marked the pivotal moment where history began to pivot. Henry's desire for a legitimate son drove him towards seeking an annulment of his marriage, challenging the authority of the Pope, and reshaping the religious and political landscape of England. Catherine's unwavering dedication contrasted with Henry's obsession, highlighting a clash between personal loyalty and political necessity. The seeds of England's future instability were sown in these years of grief, devotion, and unfulfilled expectation, a tension that would ultimately lead to divorce, the English Reformation, and a kingdom forever changed. Imagine a boy, born in the cold winter of Greenwich, who could have silenced every whisper of dissent and reshaped history itself. A healthy male heir from Catherine of Aragon would have altered the course of England in ways that contemporaries could scarcely imagine. Instead of the succession crisis that would plague Henry VIII's reign, a son would have cemented the Tudor dynasty, fulfilling the king's deepest desire and providing a clear line of succession that could stabilize the kingdom for decades. Had Catherine delivered a boy, Henry's reaction would have been a mixture of unrestrained joy and renewed political confidence. The court, ever attentive to the whims of the monarch, would have shifted immediately. Factions that had been jockeying for influence over the king's favor now found themselves recalibrating in light of a secure succession. Conservative courtiers who championed traditional alliances with Spain and the Catholic Church would have gained newfound leverage, while reformist elements, eager to exploit Henry's dissatisfaction with Catherine, would have found their ambitions curtailed. The ripple effects of a male heir would have been immediate. Anne Boleyn, whose allure and political savvy eventually captured Henry's obsession, might never have risen to prominence. Her marriage and subsequent influence, key triggers for the English Reformation, would likely have been forestalled. Jane Seymour, too, who would historically produce Edward VI, might have remained a relatively obscure figure in courtly circles. The court's romantic and political intrigues, which fueled Henry's personal and religious upheavals, would have diminished dramatically. Thomas Cromwell, whose rise was fueled by Henry's marital crises and the consequent reformation of church and state, would have seen his political maneuvering constrained. Without the need to navigate divorce, annulments, and the dissolution of monasteries, Cromwell's energy might have been directed toward more conventional governance, potentially strengthening the monarchy's ties with Spain and consolidating Catherine's influence. Her family, already prominent and politically savvy, could have played an even larger role in shaping England's alliances, diplomacy, and domestic policy. Mary, who historically struggled to assert her authority and legitimacy under the shadow of Elizabeth and Edward, would have grown up in a secure but politically secondary position. Her status as the king's eldest surviving child would have been acknowledged and respected, yet she would never have been forced into the limelight as the sole heir in a turbulent religious climate. Elizabeth, similarly, would not have been labeled illegitimate or treated as a pawn in dynastic disputes. The court's attention and Henry's affection would have remained largely focused on the male heir, providing a clarity of succession that history never enjoyed. Beyond the palace walls, the implications for England itself are profound. The absence of marital turmoil would have prevented the rupture with Rome, delaying or even avoiding the English Reformation. Religious conservatives might have retained influence over the church, monasteries could have remained intact, and the dramatic shifts in doctrine, power, and property that defined Tudor England might never have occurred. Political stability, driven by a secure heir, could have fortified the monarchy and provided a smoother path for governance, diplomacy, and succession planning. In essence, one child born in the cold halls of Greenwich had the potential to rewrite the story of Tudor England. The succession would have been secured, marital scandal averted, and the religious, political, and social trajectory of the nation fundamentally altered. History as we know it, divorce and Boleyn's rise, the Reformation, and the turbulence of Henry's court hinges on the absence of this heir. A single birth might have prevented decades of upheaval, reshaping not only the monarchy but the very identity of England itself. Without Henry's desperate desire for a son, the Church of England might never have broken from Rome, or broken in an entirely different way. The very catalyst that propelled England into religious upheaval was Henry's obsession with securing a male heir. In reality, his failure to produce a son with Catherine of Aragon drove him to annulments, marriages, and ultimately, the creation of a separate church under his control. But with a male heir, the pressure that fractured the kingdom's religious unity would have been alleviated, and England's spiritual landscape might have evolved more gradually, or even remained largely Catholic. A male heir would have strengthened England's alliance with Spain, Catherine's homeland, reinforcing ties with one of the most powerful Catholic nations in Europe. Such a union would have encouraged Henry to maintain traditional religious practices, respecting papal authority and avoiding confrontation with Rome. The Reformation, if it occurred at all, may have been limited to measured administrative reforms rather than the sweeping doctrinal and structural changes that historically disrupted English society. Monasteries, cathedrals, and religious institutions might have remained intact, continuing to serve as centers of education, culture, and charitable work. Protestant influence, which surged during Henry's marital crises and Edward VI's reign, would have faced significant delays. Reformers like Archbishop Thomas Cranmer, whose rise was intertwined with Henry's need for annulment and subsequent marriages, may have found their opportunities curtailed. Under a satisfied king with a secure succession, clerical and courtly power would have remained largely aligned with Catherine's Catholic family and their conservative allies. Any reforms initiated would likely have been cautious, incremental, and aimed at efficiency rather than radical theological change. This alternate religious trajectory would have had profound implications for England's domestic and international politics. Religious stability at home could have fostered a more cohesive society, reducing the oscillation between Protestant and Catholic monarchs that characterized the 16th century. Abroad, England's alliances would have remained centered on Catholic powers, potentially avoiding the political isolation that later accompanied Elizabeth I's Protestant policies. Diplomacy, trade, and military strategy could have followed a more predictable course, anchored in shared religious values rather than sectarian conflict. The consequences extend beyond immediate politics. For future Tudor monarchs, a stable religious foundation would have shaped governance, succession, and the moral authority of the crown. Children like Edward, Mary, and Elizabeth, whose identities and legitimacy were historically contested, would have been born into a context of continuity rather than upheaval. Policies, culture, and even popular faith would have developed in a more measured, less volatile fashion, allowing the English population to adapt gradually rather than endure repeated shocks of reform and counter-reform. In short, the presence of a male heir could have transformed England into a realm defined by religious moderation and continuity. Instead of a nation torn by alternating zealotry and rebellion, Tudor England might have experienced steady spiritual governance, reinforcing international alliances, preserving cultural institutions, and allowing the monarchy to focus on diplomacy and governance rather than doctrinal wars. One child, it seems, could have rewritten not only the dynastic story of the Tudors but the spiritual identity of an entire nation. A stable heir changes everything, from alliances in Europe to England's colonial ambitions. In the actual history of Henry VIII's reign, the lack of a male successor fueled instability, forced marital maneuvers, and prompted costly conflicts with France, the Holy Roman Empire, and the papacy. But in a world where Catherine of Aragon bore a healthy son, the very foundation of English politics would have shifted. Henry's foreign policy, long influenced by dynastic anxieties, could have centered on diplomacy and alliance building rather than personal obsession and reactionary warfare. With a male heir securing the Tudor succession, England's marriage alliance with Spain would have been reinforced, strengthening ties with one of Europe's dominant powers. Diplomatic engagement with France, while still complex, might have been more measured, relying on negotiation rather than opportunistic conflict. The king, confident in his succession, could have avoided expensive military campaigns intended to bolster his prestige or compensate for dynastic uncertainty. European courts would have seen England as a stable, reliable partner, not a kingdom fractured by marital crises and religious upheaval. The continuity of succession would have significant domestic consequences as well. Edward VI's short reign, Mary I's contested claim, and Elizabeth I's eventual accession were all shaped by uncertainty over the male line. A secure heir born to Catherine would have prevented these succession crises, providing long-term political predictability. The Tudor monarchy, solidified from Henry's generation onward, could have enacted policies with a clearer, more consistent vision, maintaining the authority of the crown and reducing internal factionalism. Noble families would have oriented their loyalties toward a stable dynasty rather than opportunistically exploiting instability. Internationally, England's reputation would have been transformed. Rather than being viewed as a kingdom rife with religious schisms and dynastic disputes, England would have been respected as a politically coherent and strategically valuable player in European affairs. Strong, Consistent leadership would have allowed for more sustained engagement in trade, maritime ventures, and early colonial exploration. The crown could have pursued overseas ambitions with greater resources and less distraction from domestic upheaval, potentially accelerating England's influence abroad while maintaining strong continental alliances. This stability would not only have shaped political alliances but also the broader trajectory of English society and governance. By avoiding the repeated shocks of succession crises and religious reform, the monarchy could have cultivated a predictable environment for culture, law, and administration. Courtiers, merchants, and diplomats alike would have been able to operate within a clearer framework of authority, strengthening institutional continuity. The political landscape of Europe, meanwhile, would have recalibrated in response to a Tudor England that was both influential and steady, less prone to impulsive wars or radical shifts in policy, more capable of shaping continental events on its own terms. In sum, a male heir would have transformed England from a reactive, crisis-driven state into a confident, respected power. Succession stability would have minimized internal strife, enhanced diplomatic influence, and potentially accelerated overseas ambitions. England's political and international trajectory, shaped by a single birth, might have been defined by prudence and continuity rather than turbulence and unpredictability, remaking not only the Tudor monarchy but also the kingdom's place on the European stage. Elizabeth I might never have been queen, and Mary's struggle for power could have ended before it began. In a Tudor England anchored by a male heir from Catherine of Aragon, the trajectories of Henry VIII's daughters would have been fundamentally altered. Mary, historically thrust into a world of political contention, religious turmoil, and contested legitimacy, would have grown up as a secure yet politically secondary princess. Her devotion to Catholicism would have remained, but her influence would have been carefully managed within a court guided by dynastic stability rather than crisis. She could have been married strategically to a foreign prince, reinforcing alliances with Spain or other Catholic powers, and playing a diplomatic role rather than engaging in the struggle for the throne. Elizabeth, too, would have experienced a vastly different upbringing. Educated as a humanist and steeped in Renaissance learning, she would have retained her status as a cherished daughter of the king, yet she would never have assumed the throne. Her brilliance, political acumen, and charisma might have shaped court life, literature, and patronage in subtle ways, but the dramatic ascension that earned her the title of the Virgin Queen and the cultural flourishing that followed would have been unnecessary. Elizabeth's legacy, instead of dominating England's identity, would have been limited to influence within the confines of a stable court and under the shadow of her brother, Henry IX. Anne Boleyn's historical significance, so intertwined with Elizabeth's birth and the Reformation, would likewise have been diminished. Without Henry's desperate pursuit of a male heir from another woman, Anne's influence would likely have been minor or forgotten entirely. Her rise to power, courtly intrigue, and tragic fall, which reshaped English religion and politics, would have been replaced by a more conventional noble narrative, her personal ambitions overshadowed by the stability brought by Catherine's son. The long-term succession of the Tudors would have been secure. Henry VI's reign would have ensured continuity, preventing the turbulence of Edward VI's short-lived Protestant rule, Mary I's Catholic restoration, and the eventual oscillation between Protestantism and Catholicism. England would have avoided decades of dynastic uncertainty, factional infighting, and religious extremism. The monarchy could have cultivated a steady line of heirs, creating predictable governance and a stronger, more centralized royal authority. Yet this stability comes at a cost. The golden age of Elizabethan England, with its exploration, naval dominance, literary triumphs, and cultural innovation, might never have occurred in the same way. The very challenges that forged Elizabeth into a shrewd, charismatic, and resilient monarch would have been absent. Art, literature, theater, and overseas expansion, fueled by her unique leadership, would have developed differently, potentially delayed or reshaped under a monarchy defined by continuity rather than crisis. England, while politically secure, might have lacked the dynamism and global influence that characterized the late 16th century. In this alternate Tudor timeline, the daughters of Henry VIII would have lived secure, influential lives but never shaped history as we know it. Mary's devotion and diplomacy, Elizabeth's intellect and charm, and Anne Boleyn's legacy, all intertwined with personal and political turbulence, would have been subordinated to a single male heir. England would have been stable, prosperous, and predictable, but the brilliance born from adversity might never have illuminated the world. One boy's survival could have erased the Elizabethan Golden Age and changed the world as we know it. The birth of a male heir to Catherine of Aragon would have created a stable Tudor succession, but this stability would have reverberated far beyond the palace walls. England's cultural, intellectual, and global trajectory, so vividly shaped by Elizabeth I's reign, would have unfolded in profoundly different ways, reshaping literature, exploration, naval power, and social dynamics. The literary landscape, for instance, would have been altered. Figures like William Shakespeare, Christopher Marlowe, and Edmund Spenser wrote and thrived under the unique pressures of Elizabeth's court, her patronage, and a society in religious and political flux. Without the dramatic challenges of Elizabeth's accession, the fertile tension that inspired innovation, satire, and experimentation in drama and poetry may have been muted. Literature could have remained more conservative, reflecting a monarchy that prized stability and conformity over bold expression and national identity forged through adversity. Global exploration, too, would have been affected. The Protestant motivations driving English ventures to the Americas and beyond, seeking refuge, opportunity, and religious freedom, would have been delayed or diminished. A male heir from Catherine would have reinforced Catholic alliances, particularly with Spain, potentially redirecting England's overseas ambitions toward cooperation rather than competition. English fleets, instead of challenging Spanish dominance, might have operated alongside Spanish forces, slowing the rise of a distinctly English colonial presence in the New World. The clash of empires, a hallmark of the late 16th and early 17th centuries, could have been muted or delayed by decades. Naval power and international strategy would have reflected this alliance-driven stability. England's famous triumphs at sea, including the defeat of the Spanish Armada, were shaped by Elizabeth's political acumen and Protestant nationalism. In a world guided by Henry IX, English-Spanish cooperation could have minimized naval conflict, creating a Europe in which England's maritime ambitions were subordinated to diplomacy and familial ties rather than rivalry. England's role as a dominant naval power and later global empire might have developed more gradually, altering centuries of exploration, trade, and colonial expansion. Social structures would also have evolved differently. The rise of the gentry, empowered by economic growth, cultural patronage, and religious independence under Elizabeth, would have been slower. Religious dissent, a catalyst for political engagement and intellectual ferment, might have been constrained under a monarchy prioritizing continuity and alignment with Catholic Europe. England's internal dynamism, its social mobility, vibrant court culture, and emerging national identity would have been more measured, less prone to the bursts of creativity and assertiveness that characterized Elizabethan society. Ultimately, the survival of one child could have had profound global ripple effects. Literature might have been more restrained, exploration delayed, naval dominance tempered, and social transformation slowed. The course of history, both within England and across the world, demonstrates how fragile it truly is, how a single birth can shape the destiny of nations, cultures, and empires. In imagining this alternate Tudor England, we see a world both more stable and less brilliant, a world in which the sparks of creativity, adventure, and ambition are tempered by the comforting predictability of dynastic continuity. A single heartbeat in a queen's womb could have altered centuries of politics, faith, and culture. History is often written as if it were inevitable, yet the Tudor dynasty reminds us how fragile and contingent events truly are. Catherine of Aragon's repeated miscarriages and the absence of a male heir set off a chain reaction that reshaped England and, by extension, the world. Each personal tragedy, political maneuver, and religious conflict can be traced back to that fragile moment, highlighting the butterfly effect in action. Consider Anne Boleyn, whose rise and fall were inseparable from Henry VIII's obsession with a son. In an alternate timeline where Catherine bore a healthy boy, Anne's influence might have been minimal or forgotten entirely. The court intrigues, marriages, and scandals that fueled England's break from Rome would have been unnecessary, leaving the king satisfied, loyal, and politically secure. A male heir would have stabilized the succession, quelled factional rivalries, and spared England decades of religious and dynastic turmoil. The ripple effects of that one child would have extended far beyond the palace, creating a kingdom defined by predictability rather than crisis. Yet, this imagined stability comes at a cost. The absence of Elizabeth I's reign, born from adversity and political acumen, would have deprived England of a unique period of cultural brilliance, national identity, and global ambition. The golden age of exploration, literature, and naval supremacy, so intimately tied to Elizabeth's leadership, might never have occurred. England would have been stable, yes, but less dynamic, less innovative, and potentially less influential on the world stage. The very challenges that historically forged remarkable leadership, inspired artistry, and propelled exploration would have been absent, replaced by a secure but less vibrant society. This counterfactual reflection forces us to ask a provocative question. Could a perfect dynasty have been a worse story for humanity? While political and religious stability might have reduced suffering and prevented upheaval, it may have also stifled creativity, courage, and innovation. The struggles, failures, and unpredictability of history often catalyze greatness in ways that calm, orderly timelines cannot. Catherine's personal grief and Henry's relentless ambition, painful as they were, produced a cascade of events that ultimately shaped England's identity, culture, and global impact. History, in this sense, favors the unexpected. A single miscarriage, a single unfulfilled desire, and the course of the Tudor dynasty, and indeed the world, changed irrevocably. Reflecting on this butterfly effect underscores the precariousness of power, the interconnectedness of personal and political decisions, and the way individual lives can pivot the fate of nations. In imagining what could have been, we are reminded that history is neither fixed nor fair. It is fragile, contingent, and often made extraordinary by its accidents, tragedies, and unpredictable twists. One heartbeat, one child, one courtly decision. It is astonishing to realize how much the world hinges on such fragile moments. Tudor history demonstrates that while stability is comforting, it is often chaos, not perfection, that leaves the most lasting legacy. History is written by those who survive, but sometimes it is the failures that create legends. Catherine of Aragon's hypothetical triumph, bearing a male heir, could have prevented divorce, a religious schism, and decades of political turmoil. England might have remained steadfastly Catholic, alliances with Spain strengthened, and the Tudor succession secured with certainty. The cultural and global transformations spurred by Elizabeth I's reign, the golden age of literature, exploration, naval dominance, and national identity might never have unfolded. One child, one heartbeat, could have altered not only the destiny of a dynasty but the trajectory of a nation and the world itself. Reflecting on this fragility, we are reminded that history is shaped as much by absence as presence, by what fails to occur as much as what does. Imagine the England that never was, and ask yourself, how different would the world be today? If you enjoyed exploring this alternate Tudor timeline, like, share, and subscribe for more What historical journeys.